Certainly, I know there are a lot of people who are getting very tired about the rest of the world, the US and the OECD, lecturing Africa about energy. No, you need to get away from oil and gas. Well, Africa is not creating the pollution from oil and gas, it's the rest of the world. And Africa would like to still get foreign exchange revenue from developing oil and gas. So there is a bit of a push pull there. But I think individual countries with strong governance and individual states in Nigeria will continue to grow and prosper, and hopefully it will raise the grassroots.
Hello, everyone. If you've ever wondered what the big money in London, New York, and Houston actually thinks when they look at Africa, my next guest has been in these rooms for over 30 years. Edward Voelcker is a British finance and governance specialist who has spent his entire career in the intersection of global capital and African continent. He has worked for some of the most powerful institutions in the world. Former partner at KPMG Lagos, he led energy and natural resources advisories across sub-Saharan Africa. At Chevron, he worked on major oil and gas transactions, and at BG Group, he managed investment planning across Europe. He lived and worked in 5 different countries, spending more than 8 years on the ground in Nigeria. He now runs Castleman Consulting and is a director at Pedestal Africa, a firm that helps international investors navigate the complex but erroneous opportunity of doing business in sub-Saharan Africa. And he's known as one of the most straight-talking voices, what it actually takes to invest in Africa and get it right. Please welcome Ed Voelcker to Africa Capital Connect. Ed, welcome to the show.
Kwame Boateng, thank you so much for your time, and I'm looking forward to this chat.
Absolutely. So, Ed, you're from upstate New York. You could have built your career in New York, U.S., anywhere you wanted. But for over 30 years, you've had boots on the ground in Africa. What pulled you in, and what keeps you there all these years?
That's a great question, and I'm often asked that. First, of course, by my worried parents and other relatives who sometimes only see the negative, but they've learned to accept the positive as well. And the simplest answer as a soundbite is simply the challenges. I think everybody knowing and watching your videos will know the challenges in Africa and my focus in West Africa. And some love those challenges and hate those challenges and every view in between there. But I've really fallen in love with those challenges and enjoy them quite a bit.
Ed, why don't you take me back to the beginning, right? Where you grew up, where you got started, what got you to Africa, what got you interested into the continent, and just tell us that whole path of where you are today.
Certainly. So I was born and raised in upstate New York, in Rochester, New York, which is known for a wonderful corporate failing. It is the home of Eastman Kodak Company, and people of a certain age will remember Kodak film and will have carried around a camera with Kodak film. When I was growing up there in the 70s and 80s, about 1 in 4 people in Rochester worked for Kodak. They had a bonus day on April 1st every year where they gave out their company bonuses, and I think a ton of new cars were sold the week after that. Sadly, the story of Kodak is separate. We won't go into that, but it is literally no more. I think I got into my interest in finance, which is where most of my background has been, by being a newspaper boy. Again, the younger folks may not remember, but newspapers were delivered by people and put in people's front doors and things. And I did that in the snow and weird weather of Rochester for about 4 or 5 years. Really loved it. We were independent contractors. We bought the newspapers from what was a Gannett company at the time and still is, and sold them to the people we delivered to. Collected money, paid bills. I got a checking account when I was 12. I had a debit card when I was 13. Really liked finance, and it went very well. So went to Carnegie Mellon for university in undergraduate business and an MBA. I was able to do a 5-year program, which was very time effective to do the undergrad and the MBA. And then decided I wanted to work in California. My brother had gone to university in California and looked for jobs in California, which I can go in and tell you about if you'd like to know. But where do you want to go next with that life history, sir?
I guess I'm more concerned about your direction into Africa, your path into what made you want to go to Nigeria and work there for 8 years and explore the continent. I'm more interested in that direction on how the path that got you there.
Perfect. Well, coming out of university, I had various job offers in California. One was Chevron, previously called Standard Oil of California. And I started with Chevron in finance. I did 4 years in their headquarters. And then I put up my hand and said I wanted to go overseas. And that wasn't done too much by headquarters finance people. But I first went to Papua New Guinea, which was not my choice, it was their choice. And my second assignment was Lagos, Nigeria. And I went there in 1994, and that's where the love affair started. The mid 90s in Nigeria were a bit of a tough time during the Abacha regime, but Chevron was doing pretty well in its relationship with NNPC, the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, and did a lot of finance work there, joint venture accounting, a variety of other things. After that, I went on and did other things for Chevron for a while, including some oversight of business development in West Africa. And when I left Chevron in 2008 and joined BG Group, which you referenced at the beginning, they were interested in having me go back to Nigeria as their finance director for Nigeria, which I promptly did. It built on from there. I can go through the rest of the jobs, but the simple love affair with difference, with being outside my comfort zone, with having to think on my feet a lot, always as part of a team. I was never an individual. I was always working for large corporations and a team. But working with those teams, meeting new people, new challenges, wonderful. Really loved it.
Ed, what was your day to day as far as what you were doing with Chevron and even KPMG, right? I believe you were a partner out there. What was your day to day operation?
Sure. With Chevron, I had, I think, about 18 or 19 accountants of a variety of different disciplines working for me. Joint venture reporting was the key there because the operation, most of Chevron's operation was a 60%, 40% JV, Chevron at 40%, NNPC at 60%. So we spent all the money, accounted for it, and expected NNPC to pay cash calls and return our spending. So that was the bulk of it. Warehouse accounting as well. We computerized the warehouse while I was there. It had previously sort of been, old ledgers and things. And then fixed assets accounting. So I am not an accountant by trade. I'm not a CPA or anything like that, but had enough finance experience and balance sheet knowledge to be able to do those. And I think helped develop people. People development was a large amount of the job as well.
Okay. Now, what about KPMG? Was it similar experience over there?
KPMG is, to both myself and KPMG, we both had to come to the conclusion that business development in upstream oil and gas is very, very different than business development working at a professional services firm like KPMG. At Chevron, we would go knock on people's doors, usually governments of various countries, and say, we would like to pay you money to have access to your oil and gas somewhere in your country. We would like to enter an agreement. We will put capital at risk and things. We will try and find oil and gas, develop them for win-win for both parties. Obviously, at KPMG, at professional services, you're knocking on people's doors saying, would you give me your money? And I will solve a problem for you based on the knowledge of KPMG worldwide and things. So that was quite a change, which literally I couldn't have explained that way before I started with KPMG. It's obvious to everybody who's done both sides, but it was somewhat new to me. The professional services of KPMG are very strong. We can certainly solve lots of problems for lots of companies, but you have to convince the companies to part with their hard-earned money.
So right now, what is your current focus, Ed? What is your bread and butter? What are you working on now as far as Africa related?
My bread and butter, if I can try a shameless plug here, I don't know if this works, is any energy intelligence. So Eni is a startup that came to life about 6 years ago, founded by two British gentlemen here in the Midlands. And it is a fitness tracker to monitor basically the kilowatt hours you use in your home or business focused on Nigeria, areas where you do not have stable grid electricity. So most people in Nigeria and some in Ghana, to some extent, may have power from their grid, from their power provider, but also a generator, solar panels, and batteries and inverters. And Eni is there to measure all that for you at a very realistic cost, give you data to make better decisions, and save money on energy. As a startup, our main issues are funding. We've raised a fair amount of equity capital and had some good UK government grants through the Energy Catalyst program, but growth can be slow, growth can be challenging, like for any startup. So constantly looking for new funding and, more importantly, new customers.
Is the reason why the funding is not there because it's Africa related, do you think?
Great question. Sometimes, and we're sort of stuck in two parts. For some firms that will invest in African companies, we're not African enough because we are a UK company, incorporated in the UK governance and things like that. But we do 95% plus of our business in Nigeria and things. So that's one of the issues, certainly. But everybody in Nigeria who sees our product gets it instantly. It's a bit more of a sell to places that have a stable grid. And when they walk up to a light switch and turn it on, the light always comes on.
Okay, okay. So Ed, you've lived in Nigeria for over 8 years, right? What is it about doing business that you understand differently from those that haven't actually lived on the continent?
It's hearing the words and deciphering what those really mean in practice. Some of the culture is they will rarely tell you to your face, we don't like your proposition, we don't like your message, you are wrong, you misunderstand things. They would much rather be kind or gentle, almost lead you along, making you think everything is working well. But you have to quickly understand, well, that may not be the case. You have to check from many angles as to whether your message has gotten through. I guess that would be the first one that comes to mind. Certainly for Eni right now, we provide transparency on the amount of diesel that a company would consume. Well, diesel consumption is somewhat of a racket in parts of Nigeria, not all parts, not everybody is in on a racket, but providing transparency or improved governance over actual diesel wouldn't be popular with some people. They'd prefer the status quo. They'd prefer that nobody has the transparency and the improved data on that issue. Now, we can't say is that a majority or a minority or what part, but we probably struggled with that sometimes. Is it the right message?
Got it. Okay. So can you tell me why you decided to start with Nigeria? Why Africa? Knowing some of the challenges, you've been there for many years. You've seen some of the complications. Like you said, sometimes they'll tell you stuff just to please or just to satisfy you for the moment, but they're not really interested. Why is deciding to move into Africa and Nigeria first?
In terms of the market size and simply the need, it is the number one place we could think of. The grid power is terribly underprovided. They should be producing hundreds of kilowatts of electricity, gigawatts, sorry, and they are producing sort of 5. That's not even stable. Grid collapse, and just the fact that every small business has a generator, has solar, has batteries and inverters. As a finance guy, I was saddened to hear that the number one cost of a chicken chain, selling chicken meals and things like that, is not their staff or even chicken. It's energy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Their number one cost above the cost of chicken and above staff is their kilowatt hours to run their operation. So when you see that, and we are dead certain that our system will save them money and have them make better decisions, that's direct, money in their pocket to do other things and expand their business.
Okay. Can you break down how changing that concept again? Like, can you go a little bit more into details how that work with the power source?
Well, when you connect our system, which is the size of sort of half a book, it's not very big, to all 4 of those points, the power that comes in from the utility, your generator, your solar panels, and your inverter and batteries, We can monitor all of that. We can tell you, first of all, your generator may be massively oversized. It will give you an energy audit to tell you this is the amount of power you're actually using in your operation, and here's how it works through the day and cycles up and down. So your generator may be ridiculously large. We can also just tell you that the amount of time you've used your generator, here is the diesel consumption. Is that the exact amount of diesel you're actually paying for? We hope it is. In a well-run operation, the answer will be yes. But in others, they're actually paying 2 or 3 times what they should for diesel. Then lastly, well, not lastly, there are many parts. They can literally take it to the bank to show a banker this is their diesel consumption over a month or 2 months. And if they could be financed to install solar panels, they could decrease or almost completely get away from that diesel consumption.
So it's a more like a cost savings in a way in the long run, but it's not necessarily bringing any energy to your either your from your grid or to your generator. Correct? It's just to monitor and be like sort of like the motherboard or the dashboard that sees everything that's happening within your generator and your power grid.
You nailed it. Exactly right. In that, in Nigeria, you pay your electricity tariff to the utility provider based on the hours of electricity you get. There's something called Band A and Band B. We can prove exactly how many hours you've had of electricity over, again, any period of time. And then you should, in theory, be able to go to your energy provider and simply say, this is what my tariff should be. Don't charge me this higher tariff. Charge me this lower tariff. I have not been getting the electricity you think I've been getting.
So if I'm the power grid company, I'm like, well, who is this company, right? Why should I trust what they've provided to you and the numbers that they're giving you? How do I test this? And I know how complicated stuff are in Africa. Like, how are you ensuring to these power grid companies that your system works and it's legit?
That is a brilliant question, and I think our people on the ground could answer that one, but I'm not sure I can answer that. I think we just show a complete set of data that would be incredibly hard to fake or take a huge amount of effort to fake. And we can show when they were using great power, when they were on the gen, when they were on the solar, when they were on the batteries and inverter, show a complete power profile over any period of time. And we can show it to them live. If we were in their office, if you held up a smartphone, here's the data live of what's going on, you know, as we speak.
What's the goal? Like, is it to expand in all the 50 something countries in Africa, or is it just to stick with Nigeria first and build a social proof and then move on to the next country?
Certainly get bigger in Nigeria. Yes, first tackle Nigeria. We've had great news in the last couple of months. We've been accepted into an incubator run by IHS, the tower company, the telecoms tower company, that was bought by MTN, the largest mobile phone provider in Nigeria. So hopefully they will be installing our equipment at some of their sites. And then if we could get up to all of their sites, 17,000 sites, that would be just wonderful for us. So we're very excited about that opportunity. And then go to other tower companies as well in Nigeria or beyond. Banks, we're making good inroads with banks. Banks all have multiple bank branches. They all have the outline I described. And we can have in their headquarters an instant overview of all their energy use across their entire estate.
Okay, that makes sense. Another question I had. You've sat in these rooms with KPMG, Chevron, BG Group, where the investment decisions about Africa, gets made pretty much. Just to be honest with our audience, what do Western investors actually say about Africa when the cameras are off and the PR is put away? What are they really saying about Africa and how Africa operates?
Well, I don't think they talk about Africa. They talk about individual countries. In the case of Chevron, which had been, even when I was there in the mid 90s, they had already been in Nigeria for over 30 years. They started as Gulf Oil Company. So they didn't speak about Africa, they spoke about Nigeria, and they would have honest discussions about the good and the bad of Nigeria. Gulf Oil Company got there when Nigeria was 3. I think they moved in 3 years after their independence. So they had a long history of being able to work things and knowing things that went well and things that didn't went well. To a new African country, in my last assignment at Chevron before I left in 2008, we had opened an office in Tripoli in Libya. And well, the discussions about Libya were very, very different at the time. Gaddafi was still around and things. So that was a completely different discussion. But it's very much focused on regional risk and individual country knowledge and things. So that's the best way to answer that. It's on a country by country basis, not Africa-wide basis. Discussing Africa is very tough. If you're a geologist, I guess you can discuss Africa, but it is 54 or 55 countries. I'm never sure, and they're all slightly different.
Right. And you've seen deals succeed and deals blow up. What is the single biggest mistake Western investors make when they enter into Africa to invest?
I don't know the answer to that. My flippant answer would be arrogance. Uh, in Nigeria, it is certainly the white man who looks a lot like me and puts on a good suit and may arrive in a private jet or at least business class, just thinking, I've come from Texas, the greatest oil region, or I've come from the Middle East, and we know it all, and we can fix everything in Nigeria. They're going to get their head handed to them on a platter. Any sort of arrogance is going to be knocked out of them very, very quickly. They have to respect the knowledge, respect the autonomy of the country, learn from it, look for the niche where they can hopefully find a win-win with whoever they're partnering with and whoever they're working with.
But to the flip side of that, though, I also feel like that is correct. But I also feel like you as a white man going to Africa will probably get a little bit more respect than me going back and trying to do something with Africans, right? You put on a suit and tie, and even if I put on a suit and tie, I feel like the respect level in Africa for you will be a little bit more higher than me. Is that something you've experienced while living in Nigeria, where you get a little bit more extra respect, people listen to you a little bit more and take what you say as, golden, as far as, you being white versus, somebody else of your counterpart who's, African or black?
It certainly could be true. I think right now I am in the position of saying that I have 8 or 9 years of Nigerian experience spread out over 30 years. That, I think, is more important than the white or black. It is based on some knowledge and some kudos about knowing things. The flip side, I think, is that you could open doors in local communities, maybe from where you or your extended family are from and things. You would have the subtle gestures down much better. So I'd say there are pros and cons. I will point out very, very clearly in the 90s in public, if I were walking down public, sidewalks in towns or shopping, literally, and boy, I don't know if this is controversial, the seas would part and people would get out of my way. Now, people can't tell I'm sitting down. I'm a taller guy. I'm about 6'2" and have more weight than I should. So a small amount of it was they didn't want to get run over, probably. But 30 years after that, that doesn't happen anymore. And that's good. That is a positive. There is no reason people should move for a white person walking down. Absolutely none. And so I'm pleased with that. And I think it's just noting closer to equality and things, which is a good thing.
No, that's excellent. That's excellent. So another thing I learned about was that local content laws were supposed to ensure that African countries keep most of the value of their own resources, especially when new jobs coming in or new contracts are coming in. Basically meaning that there were regulations that required foreign companies investing in countries' natural resources like oil, gas, mining to use certain percentage of local workers, local suppliers, local materials. Is that something you saw across Chevron, KPMG? Utilize some of the local folks to ensure that at least we're meeting those local content laws and regulations?
Absolutely. It is something that Nigeria was probably slow to adopt. They talked about it quite a bit in the 70s, 80s, 90s and things, but didn't get very far. And in 2010, literally overnight, they passed some fairly tough laws about Nigerian content. Sadly, by doing it in that way, it meant that almost nobody could comply with the intent or the letter of most of those laws. They did it almost like flipping a switch that said you must now have very high content. To be clear, because of the history in Nigeria, at least in terms of employment, even at the international oil companies, 97, 98% of all the employees are Nigerians. There are still some expats around, scattered here and there, but the employment is very, very high. But in terms of procuring goods, simple things like drilling cement or line pipe and things that should by now be in Nigeria still are probably not as advanced as they should be. And that area certainly needs more work on it. I will mention just very briefly in large capital projects, particularly in deep water things, even the Dangote refinery on land that was just built, they had to have a huge amount of specialty trades and specialty equipment come in that I don't think Nigeria would ever be in the position of producing. Some of it the US doesn't even produce anymore. It's all been sent to China or Korea or places like that. So there are certain types of large capital infrastructure projects where still a large amount of the stuff is going to come from overseas.
From my research, I learned that Nigeria probably sits on some of the most highest quality of oil in the world. But for some reason, it hasn't translated into wealth and prosperity for its people, right? As someone who has been inside these production sharing contracts and joint ventures, where does that money actually goes and who is accountable?
Governance and corruption have been the largest single problems in that area. Lack of transparency in government budgets, lack of transparency from the government about where the money flows, and even when there is transparency, simply poor decision making. So Nigerians often like to point out Singapore, which got its independence around the same time Nigeria did not have the sorts of oil and gas and natural resources, but through strong governance and things like that, grew to be the Singapore of today. Um, Sadly, that's not the case for Nigeria, which a lot of funding was misappropriated, or where it was spent in the country was spent on things that maybe shouldn't have been done.
Now, how do we change that process? Like, what are your thoughts on making changes to situations like that?
Well, without getting overtly political, I mean, there were three major subsidies. Well, 3 years ago, there were three massive subsidies in Nigeria. Foreign exchange rate, there was a dual foreign exchange rate. Privileged people paid much cheaper prices for dollars than the average person. Petrol, PMS, gasoline in the US was sold at a subsidized rate, which benefited everybody, including me when I was there. I didn't need that benefit, but it's nice to have when you get cheap gasoline and things like that. The third one was cheap power. Well, in this present administration, they eliminated the first two pretty much overnight. The foreign exchange differential is gone. There's one FX rate. Cheap petrol, cheap gasoline is gone. So those should provide more money into the treasury to do good things with. Now we have to then track that money. Well, others have to do that. Others have to track that money and make sure that the decision making around how that money is spent is for the benefits of everybody.
So, living in Nigeria for 8 years, did you learn how to speak the language? What was your favorite food?
Oh, my favorite food is suya, definitely, which is
Suya.
any sort of, suya, absolutely brilliant. And to some extent, jollof rice. And don't get me into the fight about Ghanaian versus Nigerian jollof rice. I'm not going there.
Ah,
Um,
you're a neutral
but
party, man. You got to be able to decide Ghanaian jollof or Nigerian jollof. You.
I just throw it out there and let everybody else fight about it, and I step back. So,
Gotcha. Gotcha.
but no, suya is wonderful for people. It's meat done in various spices and oils and then cooked over an open flame. Is usually quite spicy. I think my Nigerian friends got very impressed because it's usually served in a plastic bowl with the meat and a toothpick and a big thing of the spice and then red onions. And I would take my meat, dip it in the spice, have a piece of red onion, and I'd go in there and I'd even lick the plate at the end of it because I am a spicy food liker.
Right.
So
No, that's
enjoyed
excellent.
that.
Excellent. And the language, you
No, Because Nigerian's official language is English, no, got very lucky. Of the 5 countries I've lived and worked in, all had English as the official language. So I got to really cheat on the whole language issue there.
Were all those 5 countries in Africa? Can you list those countries?
Oh no, I've only lived really in Nigeria. I spent time in Tanzania, but Tanzania is not an English. They speak English, but it's not an official language. I've worked in the U.S. where I was born and raised. I've worked in the U.K. where I am now, and have become a citizen and have been here for 25 years. I worked in Australia. I worked in Papua New Guinea, and I worked in Nigeria. So, and all 5 of those countries are English speaking.
So during your time in Africa and spending all those years there, were you also how were you maintaining family or even relationship in wherever you're originally from? How did that work? Was it something you were able to manage, bridging those two gaps?
Technology has been so helpful. I remember the very first email I ever sent in 1992 over the IBM Prof system to my father, who was a university professor, so had access to the early internet. And well, the rest is history. We know about email. And in terms of investments, you'd appreciate this. In our Papua New Guinea office in Port Moresby, we had one copper phone line there and a small switchboard so you could route calls around. The IT department of Chevron came over with a massive cardboard box. And I said, "What's that?" And they said, "Well, it's a new item made by Cisco." Oh, what does Cisco do? Oh, they're into networking. They will use data compression, and our one copper wire will become five. Ooh, box installed by others. And boy, that's an investment I missed. When I saw the first Cisco router go into our IT hub in 1992, should have jumped all over that one. No, that's the simplest way to stay in touch with friends and family and make phone calls on birthdays. And yeah, it's been a great advantage. But we were still a letter writing family for a long, long time, well past email. We'd still write letters and put a stamp on them and post them.
Were you ever concerned with safety living in Africa?
Yes, I was. Part of it was drilled into me by Chevron, which all thought everybody was in imminent danger for everything. But I'm pleased the way they taught me personal security and to be on my toes, and I think that has worked well for me. Um, I had a couple of scary situations, none as scary as the San Francisco earthquake of 1989 when I was in a 1920s building in Chevron's headquarters. That was the scariest day of my life because it was an 8.0 earthquake, and thank goodness it only lasted about 25 seconds. But um, yeah, I mean, personal security is something I think about more than most. But today, I am perfectly happy to go to most areas of Lagos in an Uber. And most people know in Nigeria there are 2 ways to arrive. You can arrive in sort of a clapped out Toyota Corolla Uber or something, or you can arrive in a what they call a Jeep, a big 4-wheel drive with 5 outriders and guys with guns. And I don't think that's needed by most people. The Uber will do just fine.
What motivates you, Ed, at this point in your life?
I have to give a serious business answer to that.
Anything. I mean, I'm just curious.
Sure. My new used motorcycle right now, but I will go back to business. I had a motorcycle here in London that got to 100,000 miles, so sold it and have a new used bike for about a month. And tomorrow I'm headed to Scotland for some riding.
Nice.
But professionally, it is certainly any.io, and in fitness tracking. And I would like to see that business succeed and build, both for the benefit of the founders, but for the benefit of the people the customers who will save significant money and lower their energy costs and have money to do other things in their businesses. So that's the simplest motivation on that one, I think.
So Ed, you've watched Africa from the inside for 3 decades through oil booms, governance crisis, currency collapse, and now a new generation of entrepreneurs and investors changing the story, right? What do you think sub-Saharan Africa is generally heading in the next 10 years? And what has to happen for the diaspora to be at the center of that?
I'll answer the first part vaguely, but diaspora things are always a little challenging for me because I'm not really part of the diaspora per se. And I've certainly discussed with people various things, but I would say that it will be country by country. I think if Nigeria can continue its energy transition, which it talks about already, and can have less dependence on oil and gas revenue, that will be a good thing for the planet and all of that. Certainly, I know there are a lot of people who are getting very tired about the rest of the world, the US and the OECD, lecturing Africa about energy. No, you need to get away from oil and gas. Well, Africa is not creating the pollution from oil and gas, it's the rest of the world. And Africa would like to still get foreign exchange revenue from developing oil and gas. So there is a bit of a push pull there. But I think individual countries with strong governance and individual states in Nigeria will continue to grow and prosper, and hopefully it will raise the grassroots. The problem usually is the base and raising the standard of living. And Nigeria has not increased its, per GDP standard of living for ages, which is sad. I am positive, and I think the two things I mentioned, the FX subsidy and the gasoline subsidy going away, are two good things. The third one that still needs to be tackled in Nigeria is the electricity subsidy. Again, incredibly painful for people, but if they would charge, potentially real prices for electricity. By the way, some people will say that the present prices are fine and do cover costs, and I'm not the expert there, but I think it's broadly considered a subsidy. So I wish the best, but specific predictions, that'd be a little bit difficult.
What about any? Where do you see that being in 10 years? What is the motivation for that? How do you see a change in Africa landscape?
I think improved transparency on data use will save companies money, will let them move away from diesel generators back to solar and things, will have them be more efficient in their energy use. And that means they can reallocate capital to better things for their business, which they would know about. I wouldn't particularly. I see any growing, I hope tremendously over the next 3 to 5 years. But to be honest, the exit for any investors is that some control company buys us, probably. And that would be fine for the right price. The board would always look at the correct merger into something bigger, because right now we are just a one product company and relatively small, but we would fit very, very well with other companies who do energy monitoring and things like that.
Do you see this moving into multiple different type of products, or is this just a one type protocol product?
I think that's hard to say. I think what we would like to do right now, we provide data to humans for the humans to make decisions and change things. In a certain way, we could get the system to then do things like turn off the generator, when it's not needed, or do various things. So it goes from monitoring to managing. So at some point in time, the system may move into the actual physical management of all those things right now, and AI may help us with that. We always have to throw out the AI buzzword these days about how that will change our product for the good, and it may very well. But at the present time, we are giving information to humans for them to make the decisions about how to optimally run their energy needs.
And if I'm an investor right now, is any something I could still invest in, or you guys already have your investor pool and your boards and everything else, or can folks still invest in any?
It's not really open to the public. It's not publicly traded and things. But if anybody does see this and wants to spend a good 10 minutes on the Eni website, maybe reading the case studies, and if they certainly have an energy background, the simple answer is yes, we would love to have them as an investor. We are looking to raise money this summer and things. So yes, if anybody wanted to reach out to me, it would be great to hear from them.
We talk a lot about investing in opportunities. Let me talk about a different kind of investment for a second. Your health is your highest return on investment. That's why I created a brand called Bow Action. We make Vestly Pro adjustable weighted vest, currently on Amazon. The vest adds up to 35 pounds to your body weight, including wrist and ankle weights. If you're serious about investing in your health and not just your portfolio, and you want to support this channel and what we're building, Please check out the link in the description below. Every purchase goes directly into keeping these conversations going. Thank you very much for your support. I do have a few questions. I call the rapid fire questions. And hopefully we could speed through that and go through our last and final question and hopefully wrap this up. I know you have
Take a quick drink of water before the rapid fire.
Please, I don't want to hold you from your motorcycle ride coming up. I know you got vacation. Anyway, from a work perspective, what is your biggest win so far?
Probably my biggest win in a certain way was leaving a comfortable career at Chevron after 21 years at a sort of strange time in a certain way in my early 40s to go out and do other things in the energy field. I think I could, I'm in my 60s now, I could still be at Chevron and retiring soon. So making that decision to move away from something certain and comfortable and try new things, I think was probably the best win for me. The way I summarize Chevron is I certainly miss Chevron. They were a family for me. And when I joined BG, I kept using they, and I didn't have the pronouns right. I was speaking about Chevron and not about BG and things after 21 years. But I don't regret my decision for one day. I definitely made the right decision. There's no doubt about that. But sometimes leaving something comfortable and maybe, your potential African investors in the States are thinking about that. They have something comfortable that's paying their bills in the States, but they yearn for something a little different, something a little bit more challenging, something that might help a country in Africa. And by and large, they should go for it.
So on the flip side, what is your biggest mistake?
Leaving Chevron? Yeah, well, no.
I like that.
I have made, Eni is funded through Green Angel Syndicate, which anybody can look up. Green Angel Syndicate is a UK-based investment syndicate that looks at things helping the green equation. I have made other investments in Green Angel Syndicate, which on retrospect were not good investments. I was part of the due diligence teams that looked into them, and could I foresee the problems that came up? No, but I bet other people could have. And the people who didn't invest, I probably should have chatted with them more. Why did I chose to invest, you chose not to invest? Please explain your rationale. So I almost certainly could have saved some money by not making some of the investments I have.
If you could go back to your 25-year-old self, what would you tell yourself right now?
Do more networking. At Chevron, my 21 years, you didn't need to network. Your family was Chevron, and you met Chevron people, and you had doors opened for you by the name or the activities going on there. But I should have stepped out more to do more things with the industry bodies or other things like that. But when you have something smooth and comfortable, you can get a little bit insular and just hang out with your own company or the direct competitors or something. And I should have just done an awful lot more networking than I did.
Name one book that changed your thinking.
Actually, you gave me sort of a bit of a heads up on that one. And again, I'm worried I'm using too much humor here, but this is important. Until the man became ill and got canceled in the last 2 or 3 years for some incredibly rude and unwise statements, we had the Dilbert Principles. And if somebody has not read Scott Adams and the Dilbert Principles, this book is 30 years old. They should. It's all cartoons, and it all just takes the mickey out of corporate culture in the most wonderful way and makes you laugh, which is very, very important, but always has a point about it. And Chevron is all over this book because he worked for Pacific Bell, the telephone company, about 1,000 yards across the road from Chevron's headquarters. So it's full of life lessons about how not to take things too seriously.
No, that's excellent. And what would you call the Mickey of corporate culture?
Oh, the bombastic statements, we're all great and we have this lovely strategy that will change the world, and kumbaya, and we will solve the world, and we're just the most amazing people. And the verdict is still out, let's put it that way. So one has to laugh at that stuff because otherwise, at least for me, it would have driven me completely bonkers.
If you had 10,000 right now to invest in Africa, what would you invest it in?
Anything to do with education, I think. Again, back to Nigeria, because of the currency devaluation, an awful lot of foreign educational institutions, mainly at the teenage level, high school level for US or college level for UK, are going to Nigeria and setting up campuses and things because the amount of boarding school traffic and things. But anything to do with education at any level, I think. And I'm sort of looking for some investments there tangentially. So because huge young population, need for education, a big belief in education. Nigerians spend an awful lot of time on education, which is great.
The one thing that needs to change for Africa to reach its potential.
Simply improved governance, and the point that I would raise in governance is the press. Even in countries where there is free press, and people aren't killed for headlines in newspapers, the press simply needs to stand up to power better. They need to stop printing the press release. And when they're going to the newest ribbon cutting of the newest great idea, they need to ignore what they're being told and ask about the last ribbon cutting of 6 months or 1 year ago and say, you promised us a year ago that this road would be built or this school would be fixed or this water would flow. So, yeah, just improve governance and particularly the press holding people to account.
Can Africa ever unite as one country?
I don't know the answer, but I don't see the benefit of that. I mean, well, it would be like, can Europe unite? I mean, should Europe, Europe has the EU and Africa now has the African Free Trade Agreement, that was signed by 45 of the 55 countries in the last 3 years. And that has a lot of implementation problems, and that at the border, it's still not really being enforced. But Africa Free Trade should be continually looked at and things, but I don't see one set of governance across the continent or one country across the continent as a benefit.
I mean, the way I look at it is probably almost similar to the United States, right? We could have had New York separately, we could have had California separately, but uniting as one country makes you a more powerful country. So Africa always being, pegged as one country, and we always are being looked at as one country. Why not unite and become one power source? And I think if they do unite, Africa might become the next most powerful country in the world, personally, from my perspective. So I'm always curious to see what others think about that, as far as, even though I know it's going to be very challenging and extremely hard to do, but if that was to happen, I see it being either the most powerful country in the world with all our natural resources.
I really hadn't thought about it that way. I really appreciate that thought. It's a bit of an eye opener to me. Nigeria, I always say about Nigeria, and I've said this, and boy, some people don't like this comment. Nigeria behaves like a country in two scenarios: international sports, usually being football/soccer, or xenophobia, usually being when Nigerians get abused in Ghana or South Africa. In both those cases, Nigeria unites and acts like a unified country. Otherwise, it doesn't really. It it acts like various pieces, and I won't go into those pieces, but yeah. So, oh boy, that's going to get some negative comments, I
No,
think.
I mean, those are your opinions, right? And I think a lot of us from the continent see some of these issues as well. So feel free to express how you feel about what you saw on the ground.
The African Continental Free Trade Agreement, CFTA. I just remembered what it was. It was signed 2, 3 years ago, and the implementation will be difficult. But if trade could improve, I think that would be a good step in the right direction. And then maybe it would move on to things like you mentioned, where they unify as a country.
Okay. My last question, and before I get to my last question, is there anything that we missed that we were supposed to cover that we probably didn't cover today that you would like to at least address before we get off?
Well, if you would give me 2 minutes, I would point out to anybody who is thinking of investing in Africa two or three quick things. One, spend money on expertise, even if money is tight. And I'm not plugging big four accounting firms like KPMG or whatever, but if you need to hire a good lawyer, hire a good lawyer. If you need to hire a good accountant, hire a good accountant. It is almost always money well spent. Related to that is be careful about related party transactions. Just because your cousin's brother's driver is known to you doesn't mean they are the best person to do certain things in your organization. Find the expertise that really solves the problem. And sometimes you'll get pressure to use relatives or people looking for jobs that are known. Maybe they fit, but you need expertise. And if you're a startup, the decisions you make on individual employees are key. You're a very small company, and each person you bring on board has to really carry their own weight. So make the right hiring decision there and don't be pressured into friends or acquaintance or family members. Just wanted to get those two things out there for anybody thinking of looking at any investment across the world, but particularly in Africa.
How do you find that right person?
Right. Well, going back to the big four companies, even if you're small and you think, oh, I can't go to KPMG, I can't afford their fees or something, I would push back on that immediately, particularly their local offices. Approach them on LinkedIn or something. Just be dead honest. They see it all the time. I'm a small company trying to do ABC. I think I need to register. I need to get an expatriate quota. I don't know. I have a litany of things. Almost all of those firms have entry packages because they've heard it before. And they will have to somewhat believe in you or believe in your mission. If you're the 90th company showing up to do, make Nollywood movies or something, they may push back and go, we've seen this all before. But they will charge prices that fit a small business because they want to build that relationship. If you succeed, they will succeed. So, try that approach.
That's an excellent approach right there. Thank you so much. My last question is going to be what I call the bridge, right? Every episode, I like to leave specific resources, specific contact, specific opportunity for the audience to hopefully utilize at any given point to make a difference today. What is that specific resource, specific contact, or anything you want to leave on the bridge for our guest, our audience to utilize?
Two things: reaching out to angel investing networks already in Nigeria and Ghana and things like that. You can find them. There's a Lagos Angels Network. There's a Ghana Angels Investment Network called GAIN, things like that. Reach out to them, learn from them, ask them for assistance, whatever feels appropriate there. I think those are, again, I don't want to say everybody's done it all before, but they've heard these messages and they may be able to help you. I don't represent, by the way, either of those organizations or belong to either of those organizations, but reach out to them. And then tied to that is LinkedIn. A whole ton of people have X thousand connections, and you don't get any prizes for those. So it's really about the value you have in them. And have you gone down your list and see, search your country and search an expertise, and do you really know these people and how can they help you? People have all sorts of thoughts about LinkedIn, good, bad, and otherwise, but used correctly, it can be incredibly beneficial to startup people or people making new investments in new areas.
No, that's excellent. Ed, thank you so much. This was great. A lot of great jewels you dropped, a lot of great insight. I really appreciate your time for joining me today. Hopefully we'll continue to keep in touch and network as time goes on. And I'd love to hear more about Annie and see how that's going as well. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your time. Good luck to you as an entrepreneur starting up a new thing. I hope the website and the videos continue to go well.
Appreciate
and your business grows well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ed. I'll see you later. Bye.